Welcome to the Friendzy.
I'm Melissa Carter.
And I'm Jenn Hobby. The Friendzy is here to change the conversation around age
so that you can celebrate all your years rather than lie about them.
We celebrate real stories by real women so that you too will share your story.
I'm Melissa, and I was sophomore class president, junior class vice president, and senior class president. Thank you very much.
Well, hey, Madam President. I'm Jenn Hobby, and I am a burrito enthusiast. I could eat a burrito for every meal, every day of the week, and not complain not one time. I really consider it the perfect food.
Can I ask, is there a certain place that you like to get your burritos, or do you like to make them yourself?
All of the above.
Okay.
I like them at every place I've ever ordered them. I like them when I make them at home. I like them vegetarian. I like them carnivore. I like them for breakfast. I like them for lunch. I like them for dinner.
All right. I don't think I knew that about you. All right.
I kind of sound like a burrito Dr. Seuss right there. I'll eat them with ham. I'll eat them with... All right, coming up on today's episode, you're going to hear the extraordinary story of a wildly successful businesswoman who climbed to the top of her industry using what she calls an ownership mentality. You'll learn what that means and how to apply it to your own life.
Our featured guest is Kat Cole, who is an investor, advisor, author, former COO, and president of Focus Brands in North America. She's also a mom of 2 small children. And this conversation with Kat will inspire you to think about humility, curiosity, helpfulness, and hard work, and why that matters in both your work and your personal life.
Plus, Melissa has your mirror mantra, and that's going to get you thinking about ownership mentality all week long.
So have you subscribed to the Friendzy podcast yet? Because, I mean, if you're excited about what we are going to offer you today, just think about what we've done in the past, and it's also free. So there's a reason to subscribe. You won't miss an episode. And if you have subscribed, we thank you very much. If you have subscribed also, could you share the news and tell a friend about the Friendzy? We would appreciate it very much. We want more women to hear these real stories connecting real women. So before we get to all that, Jenn, how does ownership mentality resonate with Burrito Mama?
Burrito enthusiast.
Well, I'm sorry, burrito enthusiast.
Well, here's where ownership mentality really resonates with me is about taking responsibility for our own lives. And that manifests itself in a couple of different ways. So to me, when you have that mentality about life, first, you're not a complainer, right? And I think too often in life, people lead with a complaint. We get addicted to complaining about things. You know, it's like, oh, how are you? And you don't want to be like, everything's great all the time, but you also don't want to always answer that with a complaint or a negative. So ownership mentality means even if things aren't going great in your life, they're your life and you're going to own them. You're going to take responsibility for them. You're going to accept them. And so that's the first way that it manifests for me is in not being a complainer. Mm-hmm. And then I think it's also about pride in what you do, right? So pride in your home and pride in your life and pride in your career, because when you have that ownership mentality, it's all yours. Does that make sense?
Well, it makes sense to me because as the far youngest of my family, I will say that the benefit to that experience was I could not wait to be an adult because I had 4 grown people kind of at me all the time about things. And again, my family they weren't overly critical, but it was just, I got a lot of opinions, even when they weren't solicited. And so I could not wait to be an adult. And I think that we forget about being teenagers, especially, and just wanting to be able to have our own life and make our own decisions and do all, you know, and then when you get to be an adult, then all of a sudden, for some reason, you don't want it. It's like, I have never lost that appreciation for being able to make my own decisions. Honestly.
Right. Yeah. Well, that ownership mentality, I feel like we learned a great example of that from one of our leaders in radio, who you and I both worked for. His name is Mark Rainier.
Yeah.
And I feel like he was such a great leader and had that ownership mentality about everything. He wasn't above answering the phone at the front desk.
Right.
He was never above picking up a piece of trash that somebody accidentally dropped on the ground. He just exuded that mentality about everything he did at the radio stations that we worked for. And I remember that in so many different small ways that he showed me about that ownership mentality. And I'll never forget that. The one thing I think with ownership too is that it's not about control, right? If you think ownership mentality, like, oh, I have to be in control of everything, that's not necessarily it. To me, ownership mentality is about really acceptance and confidence of the circumstances in your life.
Mm-hmm.
And so I was also thinking of another radio story. So Melissa Carter, what is the number one question we always got asked when we were working in morning drive radio?
Usually it was either what time did we get up or what celebrity. Okay, the what time we got up. Because I said, what's the best, or what's the something about celebrities?
Yes.
And what time do you get up? Yeah.
What time do you get up? And what was the answer to that?
3:30 for me.
Yep. 3:30 or 3:45 was always my answer to that.
Yeah.
And the number two question.
AM people.
AM.
Every
night. Yeah.
single day. Yes.
And the number two question that I always got when I worked in radio is, do you go to work in your pajamas?
Oh, I never got that question. That's so funny.
Everybody would always ask
Jen,
me.
did you? Well, I know the answer though, because I was there when you showed up. So
the answer is always no. And this to me came back to ownership mentality is that I always wanted to present myself in a way that I was ready for the day, that I was owning the fact that this was my schedule. I wasn't complaining about it. I wasn't whining about being tired all day long. It was one of those things where you go, okay, I have to own this position in life, this lot in life, if you will, and say, I get up early, but that means I still got to put on an outfit and be dressed and be ready for the day. So to me, that's how it manifested in my life.
Well, it's funny you say that because I think that I had the same feeling during the pandemic. So I didn't, when the pandemic started, now I've probably, it's probably dwindled a little bit as it's gone on. But at the beginning of the pandemic, I thought, even though I'm working from home, I'm still going to present myself and get dressed for work. And now, like I said, it dwindled into yoga pants and sweatpants, but still the top from the waist up.
Waist up, you look great. You're ready.
Yes, I was ready. And yes, part of that was, you're kind of called to task if you have to be part of Zoom meetings and people actually see you. But I do think there, to me, was a mentality because, like you said, with morning radio, when I was working behind the scenes off mic, I wore ball caps, didn't put on makeup, or, zip up hoodies or jeans all the time. And when I was on the mic and I was part of the show, I changed the way I dressed because, like you said, there's a different mentality to it. And I thought, you know what, there was also part of that. I should have done that with the other job. And I could tell a difference in the way I dressed based on how I felt. And so I do think that there's something you can do for yourself, even if the surroundings aren't ideal for you. Like you said, you still take ownership because you chose to be there. I think that's something that people don't realize is they choose everything that they're a part of. I told my son, we had a rough day yesterday. My son and I, we had some issues. We had some correction that had to go on. And I told him, I said, I choose to take care of you. I am your mother, but I choose to take care of you and do the things I do for you. And you choose the things that you do. So I was trying to, expose him to that mentality.
Yes.
At 6 years old, because it's like, yes, I'm your mother, but you can't take me for granted because I can always choose not to do what I'm doing. And you can always choose not to do what you're doing. And so I think a lot of people lose sight of the fact that they have more control, not to use it in the term that, like you said, don't try to be in control of everything, but they do have a choice and they do have ownership in everything they're a part of, whether they realize it or not.
And it's that acceptance of it. Even if it's a bad circumstance or a good circumstance, if you accept it, you own it, then you can fuel confidence through that. Does that make sense? And so, I thought of this, something that a wise woman named Melissa Carter told me during the pandemic.
Okay.
Do you remember when we were having this conversation and you said, whatever you're stuck at home with right now, you chose, you created this life for yourself. Yes. So remember that. And to me, that's about ownership mentality, right?
Absolutely. Yeah. I told Jen that because you can't complain in the pandemic about the state of your house, the state of your marriage, the state of your children, because this is your doing. And now I thought the pandemic was a great snapshot for every individual to see what the world they created looked like. And if you don't like what it looks like, then you can make the choices to change it. Yeah. So that's true. I mean,
But it's nobody else's fault.
It's nobody else's fault.
It's your responsibility.
Absolutely.
Right?
Absolutely.
So
yes.
It's something that this week I want to remember and apply. Anytime that I feel that tendency towards whining or complaining, I'm going to come back to ownership.
I hate complaining.
Mentality.
For sure.
I
hate complaining. I've always hated it. And I got that from my mother, Millie Pete. But it's like, again, just do what you got to do or leave it.
Yeah,
because it's a waste of my time.
Is a lack of ownership. It's a lack of acceptance of what's going on around you. So,
and I also want to jump in and say that, going further with the lesson I gave my son, the reason I also wanted to express to Mr. Carter that I had the choice and whether to take care of him or not is because I think as women too, we need to not only when we take ownership of what we're doing, we also are letting other people respect us. People, you don't respect anybody that complains. But if you take ownership, the world around you will begin to respect you. And I just don't want my son. And I'm thinking not only of our relationship moving forward, but his relationship with the women in his life as an adult. It's like people, and I told him, I said, when you're a grown man and there are people there who take care of you, they chose to be there as well. And you need to appreciate the fact that they have made the choice to be with you. And so I just want him to respect women and not just be a given that a woman is going to be a doormat to him. And so that was part of that lesson too, is I want to take ownership so that he understands that everybody takes ownership. And so if you're interacting with another person, your actions should also respect their ownership and vice versa. And if that relationship is not a good one, then again, I'm all for dissolve it and move on.
Absolutely. So those are our stories.
There's my dramatic pause.
I love it. And we want you to think about your story. Can you think about your ownership mentality and how does that apply in your life? And how can you share your own story with another trusted person in your life?
So see the Friendzy. If you have not subscribed yet, this is a perfect time to subscribe because this is where you can hear the real stories from women in this stage of life. And you're not alone if you have been worried about these very things or complained about these very things. Don't complain anymore. But we want to celebrate your stories here. It's all about storytelling. And Jenn, I want to ask you, why do you think it's important for listeners to share their own stories?
Because we have to identify them first, right? We have to identify and discover ourselves first in order to tell our stories. And I think that's essential in your relationships in your life, whether that's your relationships with your children, your coworkers, your spouse, your partners. If you can identify your own story and how these different topics and themes and things that come up on the Friendzy relate to you and how they take root in your life, and then you can share them with someone else, it brings it all to life and it allows your life to be in full color. You're not in the background. Right.
And
you are not a background character. You are not an extra. You are the main character in your life. And it's full of great stories. And we believe you got to start sharing them.
Yeah. And so that's why the Friendzy is not just about Jenn and Melissa's stories. We tell our stories so that it will inspire you to think about your own stories. And then we help engage you in telling those stories to other people and take ownership for those stories, right?
Yeah.
And then be able to not only gain respect for yourself, but have people gain respect for you as well.
You are about to hear an awe-inspiring story, speaking of stories, about how our guest, Kat Cole, became COO of a global company at a very young age. And that's coming up in just a minute. But first, let's thank our sponsor.
Kick It Pajamas.
Hold, please. Kick It Pajamas. Stylishly dressed for battle.
Boom.
Pew, 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 pew. Oh, and if you use code Friendzy, you get 10% off.
Oh, yes, that's right. Friendzy spelled like a friend with a ZY at the end.
Yep. Okay.
Our featured guest today is Kat Cole, who is an investor, advisor, author, former COO, and president of Focus Brands in North America. You see my cat's just running here. She's also a mom of 2 small children. Please help us welcome our inspiring new friend, Kat Cole, to the Friendzy. The boys decided that was the moment in which they were going to chase each other.
Kat Cole, welcome to the Friendzy.
Thanks for having me.
We are so excited to have you. For our listeners, Kat is an executive, an advisor, an investor, a board director, and speaker. She's the former COO and president of Focus Brands, and she's a mom and a wife, and we cannot wait to hear more about your story.
Oh, thank you.
Of all those things that Jenn just listed, what is the thing that is top of your list in your mind?
Wife, like hands down, just the partnership with my husband. Life is so much better. Without him, there wouldn't be the kids, which would be number two. And yeah, number one, clearly.
And you all have a beautiful marriage story too. You have to tell our audience about your marriage story and how quickly all that happened and where you tied the knot. It's so beautiful.
Yeah, we met at a entrepreneurs weekend, a group called Breakout that brings socially minded leaders together. And we had a one-night stand. So we thought we were both out of long-term relationships. He was out of an 8-year relationship. I was out of an 11-year relationship. Wow. And neither of us were looking. And we thought, oh, this would be fun. Just a great attraction. And within days, it was very clear that it was not going to be limited to that evening. And within weeks, we were proposing to each other. Aww. 2 months after we met, he rowed across the Atlantic Ocean in a rowboat. My husband's an endurance athlete in addition to being a venture capitalist here in Atlanta. And when he got back from the row, which took 45 days, we got closer through that experience, not farther apart. And we tattooed our rings in June, I believe, May or June. And then we got married at Burning Man at the end of August that same year. So we were technically bonded through our tattooed rings less than 9 months after we met. And we were married 10 months after we met.
Fantastic. So exciting.
Congratulations.
What was different about it? Because they say, when you know, you know.
It is very difficult to put into words. I mean, the beginning was just that amazing feeling that's like high school of chemistry and wanting to connect with each other nonstop, and the music of the weekend becoming this soundtrack that we made on Spotify. There's just a lot of bliss and energy around those early days. And then what layered on top of that was this realization that we were in a very similar mindset as it related to relationships, both not looking, both realizing that we learned a lot from our previous relationship and wanted to be better as a result going forward. And within weeks, realizing that we did not want to be with anyone else. I mean, I was 36 or 37, and I had in my mind that I was going to coast into my 40s by having a lover on every continent. And it was going to be this fabulous next few years. And so this was quite a diversion from that vision, yet it felt so right. And I remember a few weeks in, we were in his apartment in New York, and he said, I don't want to see anyone else. It's okay if you do for now, but that's not what I want. And it was just so powerful to hear someone be so clear about what they wanted, yet not demand I be in the same place. And it felt as if it was the longest pause in the world, because in my mind, he didn't ask me to reply, but it clearly warranted a reply. And I thought, do I feel the same way? I think I do. How on earth do I feel this way this quickly? And if I say me too, am I limiting what might otherwise be out there? And all of that went through my mind in a few seconds. And then I just replied and said, I don't want to see anyone else either. And that was just 2 weeks after we met. And when we said that, we meant ever.
So many things come to mind when you talk about that. Like you mentioned people who were asking for what they want, and not making demands on you. So that comes from maturity, from having been in relationships before where that probably was not the case. Right. That's right. And that's kind of where Jenn and I are with this podcast is, it's also about women not giving up on themselves. So if there's a lot of women who are coming out of those long-term relationships that they thought they would be in the rest of their life, and then it didn't end up that way, it doesn't mean that the better lover is not in the future, right? And so I think for so many women, a lot of times, if that plan, the plan they had in their mind doesn't work, that's where you get impatient, not only with yourself, but with other people, and try to control other people at the same time because you're trying to feel safe.
Yeah,
And
that's
so,
right.
yeah, I love that story too, because it's about it's not a part of the plan. He was not a part of the plan, but he's ends up being the number one thing for you.
That's right. And I love the feeling I had when he shared that sentiment with me was, I thought, wow, he's being direct without being directive or directing. And oh, by the way, I didn't know until the morning after our little evening that he was 29. He's 7 years younger than me. And I mean, literally, we woke up and I don't know why I asked. It was like, how old are you? And when he said 29, I was like, oh my gosh. I literally put the pillow over my face. And then in my head, I was like, why do I care?
Well, that's where we say atta girl. I mean,
and now I just turned 43 and he's now in his mid 30s. And it was very clear, despite his young age, to your point, there was a deep maturity that was there to be able to feel that way, to communicate that in such a way. And so our connection sort of transcended our age difference.
Well, Kat, if somebody is just now learning your story today for the very first time, clearly you have had an incredible career. I mean, it doesn't even, that's not the right word for it. But can you share with us a little mini history of how your career began?
Sure. I mean, it really does go back to when I was very young. We left, my mom and my sisters and I left my dad when I was 9 years old. He was an alcoholic and really great soul and human, but a terrible husband and father. I mean, I was in car accidents with him. He was not home. I mean, it was just bad. And my mom had a very, entry level job, and no one on either side of our family was well-to-do. Trailer parks, T-tops, flip-flops, Jacksonville, Florida, truckers, junkers, factory workers, like good, honest, blue-collar workers. And
I'm from Florida too. I know exactly what you're describing. Yes.
And it was a wonderful life in many ways. And yet my mom recognized that she had financial limitations and everyone around her had financial limitations. And so there was nowhere for her to go. And so she dealt with it for quite some time. And my father was the only person on both sides of the family to have a fancy job. He was an executive. And so we had a house, not a trailer. We had which was wonderful, for us. And we had others of my family didn't even have a trailer. They didn't even have a roof over their heads. And so to everyone else, it looked like we had it so great because we had the house. We had a playhouse outside. I had gifts every holiday season. We had a car. And for those reasons, for those physical stability, financial security reasons, my mom stayed despite it being bad. And eventually it got bad enough that she decided it was time to leave. And she worked 3 jobs and fed us on a food budget of $10 a week. I mean, she figured it out. But when I was 9, we left. And so I became a leader at home and a father figure at a very young age, since my mom was working so much. And I mean, it turned out to be truly beautiful, even though there's a lot of pain and sadness in the story. And all that resulted in me working at a very young age. So at 15, I worked in malls selling clothes. I was a gym maintenance person. So I cleaned sweaty gym equipment so I could have a gym membership, since I was a cheerleader in high school and a track. I was on the track team, and I needed to pay for things like shoes and uniforms and camp and training and all of that. And so these jobs helped me do that as a high schooler. And then when I was 17, I layered on a 3rd job while in high school, being a hostess at Hooters restaurants in Jacksonville, Florida. And got into college, first person in my family to get into college. And when I was 18, which was just a few months before I graduated high school, I became a waitress. In the state of Florida, you had to be 18 to serve alcohol. So I couldn't be a waitress until I turned 18. And so I became a waitress at Hooters, a Hooters girl, rocking the orange shorts and serving chicken wings and pouring beer. And I loved it. And I had such a great time. And I started college. Eventually, I dropped the other 2 jobs because being a waitress at Hooters was such a high paying, relatively speaking, hourly job. And I had tremendous flexibility. I was working 40 to 60 hours a week while I was in college, sometimes more. And when I turned 19, while still in college, while still a waitress, a few interesting things happened. I had become a cook in the restaurant. I learned how to be a Hooters cook. I became a bartender and a shift leader. So I was basically working every job in the restaurant. It allowed me to have maximum opportunity for hours and shifts and income. I loved the different jobs, so I was happy to work any of them in any combination. And it just so happened that Hooters as a company was expanding the business around the world. And they were looking for strong employees who had experience not only working multiple jobs, but training new employees in their home store, which I did. And so I had the unbelievable opportunity at the age of 19 to travel to Australia and go open the first ever Hooters franchise in Australia. And I had never been on a plane. I had only been out of the state of Florida twice in my life for cheerleading competitions, and I did not have a passport. I mean, that was
the first time on a plane. You're going to Australia.
Well,
wow.
the real first time, the real first time was when they asked me to go to Australia, and I recognized I did not have a passport. I had to buy a plane ticket to Miami to go stand in line and get my passport expedited. So that was actually my first flight. But when they asked me, I'd never been on a plane, and the only flight before the flight to Australia was the flight to Miami to get my passport. And there weren't these fancy websites and expediting services that are around now. Right. And this was 1998 and 97 or 98. And so 30 days later, I left for Australia and I came back. It was amazing, an amazing experience. I came back, I made up the classes I missed. I thought it was a once in a lifetime opportunity. And 60 days later, I got a phone call and it was the corporate office and my district manager letting me know that there was another opening coming in Central America, the first ever in Central America and Mexico. And I was requested to be a part of that training team. And I was like, heck yeah. And so, I said yes. And I went, and fast forward, I kept getting asked to be on these teams as the company expanded around the globe. After 4 openings, I was no longer a member of the team. I was now leading the team. So going early, setting up the supply chain, managing the trainers, the teams that were similar to what I was just previously a part of. And so very quickly I matriculated from, server to shift leader to international opening trainer to now leader of the openings. And this was all before I was 20. And the only downside was that I was traveling so much, I was failing college. I was just never there. People say, oh, you were so courageous to quit. I didn't quit. I failed. I literally was traveling so much. But
the odd thing is college is supposed to prepare you for what you were already doing.
Yeah.
Right.
Yes.
Yeah. And so I quit.
I got credit for what you were doing. Like you were opening companies, right?
I know. So I did drop out. I mean, there was a tiny opportunity for me to go back and stop traveling completely and make up my classes, but that was an unbearable thought to me. I was so happy with what I was doing, and I wasn't perfect at international operations, but I was much better than many others with far less effort. It was clearly my jam. It was clearly my thing. And luckily, Hooters as a company called, and they were expanding their corporate office team for the training department because of all this expansion, and asked me to apply for a corporate job. So at the age of 20, I applied for a corporate job in Atlanta, and I got hired. And so I packed up a U-Haul, had to have a co-signature for the U-Haul because I wasn't even old enough to rent it, and drove that clunky thing from Jacksonville to Atlanta. And man, just seeing that giant 75, 85 intersection for the first time, I'll never forget the connector because it was the biggest thing other than like giant highways in Argentina that I had seen.
That's so
Atlanta
many
was,
lanes. Yeah,
yeah,
how many lanes for those who are not in Atlanta, those are, I mean, there's a massive amount of lanes that span this
8
huge.
or 10 or
Yes, exactly. It
Yes.
is
it's wild.
intimidating.
It was one of those moments, when you look back, I will never forget coming up on that hill, you see Atlanta's iconic skyline, and then literally 75 turns into 8 or 10 lanes. And
Yes.
it was like, I'm in the big city. It just felt so great.
Do you remember
And
that So Def
yes,
billboard that
Oh,
was there for the
yes.
longest? I can
yes,
remember moving to
yes.
Atlanta
It was like
and seeing
so
that.
deaf,
So
always a
Def.
Chick-fil-A cow, Delta, and
Yes.
one other thing. And so that began the next chapter of my career, where now I'm living in Atlanta. I am a corporate employee, no longer a waitress or a cook. I'm learning to live off of a paycheck, which was far less than I made as a waitress. And but then, again, as the company grew, I grew. The fast forward version from there is, by the time I was 26, so 6 years later, I became one of the executives in the company. The company was doing around 800 million in revenue. And here I am, a 26-year-old vice president with the company. And as the company grew, as well, I continued to grow. We launched an airline, Hooters Air. It was a thing. Look it up. It's hilarious.
I remember.
Yeah. And expanded around the world. And I grew so much as a leader and as an executive there, with amazing mentors and friends. And eventually I started to get recruited into private equity and to run other companies. And at the age of 31, I was recruited to become president of Cinnabon. And in between there, I went back to Georgia State to get my MBA. So I have a master's without a bachelor's from Georgia State's executive MBA program. And I was offered the job to be president of Cinnabon in May of 2010. They held the job for me until I could start in October, because I promised Hooters I would not leave them while we were in the process of selling that company. And so I left Hooters on a Friday in October, started at Cinnabon, which is owned by Focus Brands and Rourke Capital, on the next Monday. And 2 months later, I graduated with my MBA from Georgia State and dug into turning Cinnabon around out of the recession, built a great team, a phenomenal story there, eventually became group president of the parent company, Focus Brands, leading the CPG, the e-commerce, the licensing division, bringing branded products to grocery stores and other channels, and then became president and COO of that company, which had become much larger over the course of my career there, and several billion in sales. And I was president and COO of Focus Brands for the last 4 years, and just wrapped up that career in January.
You had me at Cinnabon.
And Focus Brands, for those listening, if you're not, clear on the parent company, is Auntie Anne's, Carvel, Cinnabon, Jamba Juice, right? McAllister's Deli, Moe's, and Schlotsky's.
That's right.
All of those are
You
under
had me
Focus
at-
Brands.
At the cookies and the all the sugary stuff. So, but Kat, one of the things, it seemed like, for people on the outside, that seems like a very charmed life, right? Like, oh, I just was standing here and these companies just picked me up and they took me, because I think for a lot of women, this, we talk about this on the show, where I have this theory that, women are trained to sit and wait because the boy's going to ask you out, the boy's going to ask you to marry him, the boy, and so women think, oh, if I'm at a company, I'm just going to sit here and I'm going to just be perfect, and they're going to take me and they're going to swoop me up and they're going to make me vice president. They're going to send me to South America. They're so in all of that you just mentioned, how much of that, that you want to convey to women about what you had to do in order to achieve that for yourself? Like, you seem, from us just talking in this brief moment, somebody who fights for herself and is a fierce competitor. You had to do that for yourself, I'm sure, when it came to all of these positions.
Yeah, I will say there are probably 3 factors at play, and I don't think you can remove any of these major factors and have the same outcome. One factor is that in the case of early in my career, being the Hooters chapter, it was a rapidly growing company. And where there is growth, there is disproportionate opportunity, especially for those inside the company, because they simply can't hire enough people from the outside to do the work. that they need. So you can't remove growing company out of the equation of my career. If you join a company that is contracting and shrinking, there will not be as many opportunities for anyone, much less younger folks or women or people who don't perfectly fit in with the culture. So growing company is part of the equation. The second part is me as a person. I said yes to almost everything, which I don't recommend in the later stages of life and career when there are more responsibilities and more opportunities and more priorities. But in the early days, I was rewarded. And when I say yes, I mean, hey, can somebody go clean the bathrooms? Yes, I'll go clean the bathrooms. Hey, could somebody help this new employee figure out the register? Absolutely, I'll help that person. I don't mean yes to only things that seem cool or awesome or career elevating. I mean, yes to what people need around me. I have, from as early as I can remember, I have had an ownership mentality. Even if I don't own the company or the city or the house or the land, I act like I do. I have that level of care and caution. And if I see a piece of trash, I pick it up. If I see an employee who needs help, I don't think that's not my job. I think it's my job, right? It's my opportunity. It's my job. So there was something in this second bucket, which is just how I showed up into the world. That was a combination of always being helpful, being deeply curious. So I learned a lot more than many others faster because I was just curious. So helpfulness, curiosity, and I was selfish. I had to pay my bills. And so I worked really hard. If I learned in the service industry, there's always someone who wants to go home early. And so I always knew there would be more shifts for me to pick up. And I was the one who would open and close and then have back-to-back close opens, not because I was always scheduled that way, because someone always was just ready to go home and maybe didn't need the money. I needed the money. I needed the money to save for college. I needed the money to pay my bills. There was no lifeline. There was no loan. There were no friends and family rounds like this. I am it. And I, as a result, had such a clear connection between my income and my effort. More effort, more income. Now, that's not always true. And it's not always true as you get into salaried roles, but it is a healthy mindset to develop very early and very young. And so I didn't expect anything to be given to me. And so that second component of my career story, first being a part of a high growth company, the second being how I showed up, the fact that I acted like I owned the company, even though I didn't, and had great care for my environment and truly tried to help everyone that I could. It put me in a position to be seen, appreciated, and trusted for the opportunities that came from bucket number one, which is the growth of the company. The third component is the other humans, in particular, the leaders in the company who took a chance on me. And even though I was young, even though I didn't have as many years experience as many others, they saw something in me, took the time to train, develop, give me feedback, give me opportunities. And when you put those three things together, high growth company with disproportionate opportunities for people on the inside, how I showed up that established value and trust and credibility, and then others who were open-minded to provide opportunities to maybe not so obvious candidates. My story doesn't exist without all three. Mm-hmm. And that should be really thought about, I think, for anyone who's listening. Who are you in that equation? Are you the business person building a company? If you have growth, it's going to be easier for you to provide opportunities for your people. Are you the employee trying to figure out how you show up every day? This combination of humility and curiosity and helpfulness and hard work matters. And then are you the leader who needs to expand your aperture of the people who are high potential, but maybe don't have all the technical qualifications? Whoever you are, there is an opportunity for you to create for yourself and others stories that have this, this tone, this note, this light about them. Might not be all the same trajectory. But that, I think those are the secrets. It's not very secret. Those are the puzzle pieces that when you put it together, it was more than 1 + 1 + 1 = 3. It was this much greater equation. And then that continued. And if you tie that back to how I shared the pieces of my journey at Focus Brands, it's very similar. I started as the youngest president, the only female. As the company grew, I grew. I was offered the opportunity to run a new division that made me a group president, not because someone just plucked me up and said, "Oh, you're cute, here's a job," because I did such an amazing job building teams, growing a brand and a business out of a very difficult time and situation, courageously leaning into innovation that was not comfortable for the company. And it was that innovation that spurred the idea to create an entire team and business around bringing restaurant branded product to grocery and other channels. And we needed a small company within our company to go make that happen for the other brands. So I was the obvious person to take that role, not because someone, quote, liked me, but because I was already almost doing the job for one of the brands. And so I was a trusted and apparent candidate that, they could have spent time recruiting someone from a big consumer products company or to come inside, but when you, and to do this in the company, but when you put together the value of my knowledge of the company, the fact that I had proven myself in building teams, navigating complexity, navigating difficult times, building culture, and, oh, by the way, driving phenomenal financial results for the company, I was the obvious choice. My 4 years, 3.5, 4 years of running Cinnabon was one giant interview for the next job. Mm-hmm. And the same thing happened when I became president and COO. I had run the licensing division, the e-commerce and manufacturing division, the franchise business, multiple brands. I was doing the job before the job existed. Mm-hmm. And so, but at the same time, again, there were courageous CEOs who took a chance on someone like me. Hooters at most of my career, college dropout, child of a single parent, alcoholic father, non-traditional background. Oh, by the way, I have tattoos. I got married at Burning Man and I'm a total hippie and I don't fit in a lot of ways with my peers culturally, but we work incredibly well together in the business. And so in some ways I have been the very obvious choice for the roles I have taken. But in other ways, if you look at me on paper or reputationally, it's like Sesame Street. One of these things is not like the other. So again, still credit to the leaders who took a chance on me, high growth companies that needed to continue to develop leaders, and then also credit to me and how I showed up in the business.
Mm-hmm. Now, we launched the Friendzy to change the conversation around age for women. And so, Kat, with your wealth of experience, what would you say is the biggest challenge facing women over 40 in the business world? And how would you tackle that?
Wait, here's what's funny. I'm having this moment. I've always been asked the other question, which is how do you navigate being the youngest person?
Right. I know. That's why we started this podcast, right?
So you asking me that, I had this mixed emotion, like, oh, it's so cool. I get to give it advice. And I'm like, wait a minute. They're not asking me the under 40 question anymore. And I'm 3 years past 40. So funny that I'm just now having this realization. What advice would I give? I mean, 40s are such a magical decade. Mm-hmm. It's like, I don't know. For me, I still feel incredibly young.
Well, you got a youngin' at home, so that's probably your husband. Anyway,
I've got a 3.5-year-old and a 19-month-old, and on one hand, that does help me feel a little young, but mostly it makes me feel tired and old. So, I would say, gosh, such a good question. So, women in their 40s who are working, many of us these days have very young children, and that is different than a decade ago. So many are waiting later to have kids.
Melissa and I are in that same boat with you. We both have young children.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. And so we're going through a transitional period where, at least in the corporate environment, my male peers have grandchildren that are in their teens. And so it's a very different life stage to connect with others around, despite having very similar business responsibilities. And so they have no kids at home. There are certain things they can easily do. And here I am, a peer and an executive. And I remember I had to leave a board meeting to go pump. And I was not secretive about what I was doing. And I joked, I was like, well, I could sit here and have the pump running in the meeting. That wouldn't bother me, but I'm sure it would distract you. That, that sound.
Oh yeah.
And no one criticized that. I'm sure they thought it was kind of funny. Maybe it was a little bit of a distraction, but wow, am I at a different life stage? And if there's an emergency with my family, they're not adults and they can't take care of themselves. Mama's got to go. And it doesn't matter if it's a board meeting or a conference or a scheduled meeting. And so I do think that maybe that was a bit easier for me to navigate because I wasn't in an in-between stage of my career. I'm a president, of the company. And so there was something about that both gave me more pressure, but probably also gave me more courage, right? Like, I'm the leader. I can cancel the meeting if I need to, or I can tell someone else to run it. And so I recognize that is not always the case. And it has made me very sensitive to people at various stages in their career and making sure they don't need courage to do the right thing for their family. It shouldn't take courage, right? It should just be what's known and expected and appreciated and understood. You got to go, you got to go. If you got to go for a smoke break, great. You got to go take your kids somewhere, great. You got to go because you got to take care of a aging parent at home, which is also increasingly the case for people in their 40s. Do what you need to do. And so I come at this in a few different ways. One, people in their 40s are at very different spots in their career. It's a very transitional decade or season for careers. And I think I'm barely getting to my top earning years, the sort of peak. I mean, mid 40s to mid 50s is the promised land in a lot of ways of either flexibility and freedom, or choice and doing something small that I'm passionate about or something that's big. It feels like the world of choices, in one ways professionally is open. I'm young enough to relate to the modern generation, but I'm mature enough to lead complex teams. And so I see a lot of the potential and the power and the possibilities of women who are over 40 in their 40s and 50s. And at the same time, the X factor is, where are we in our life stage with children, with aging parents, with our own personal intimate relationships? I mean, that can really make the 40s magical or painful, depending on where people are. And so I guess all that leads me to the answer to the question being reconciling all of our very strong points of view and priorities and where we spend our time. Are we at the end of our career? Are we so fortunate to, sort of feel like we're at this point where it's early retirement, or we've done so well at the beginning that now we can go play? Or is this a season of heavy responsibility, financial responsibility? I think of single moms who are in their 40s, who are, rocking their careers, their entrepreneurial ventures, 40s or 50s, right? That's a lot of responsibility on a human, on a woman who already disproportionately receives expectations and responsibility in the world. So I think there's this maybe tension of getting into these decades where we own more of who we are and we care less about what others think. At the same time, we may be entering seasons where we bear more responsibility. And that's a tension, I think, there. So I think that maybe is one of the biggest challenges that women, while I think there's so much magic and beauty that I've pointed out, I do think a challenge is navigating what seem to be increasing responsibilities. At the same time, we're totally starting to feel ourselves and be in our own skin and be comfortable and confident and candid. And the intersections of those things can be very positive, but it can also be super challenging.
Well, I like how you said transitional and you're looking forward to something, because that's one of the messages we want to bring across. I'm in my 50s with a young child, and like you said, and I'm a single mom, and it doesn't feel like a heavier responsibility for me. It feels more pleasurable because I am more in tune with who I am even at 51 than I was at 41. So it's that looking forward to something to continue to build, because when you said transitional, former generations called this the midlife crisis, because that's that's the
Right.
age we're in, where people would have a midlife crisis, because naturally for people who had this idea they do one thing all their lives, hopefully we're coming out of that where we realize, like you said, there's seasons, there's stages. You're not going to be in the same job from 18 to 65. You're not going to be married to the same person from 18 to 65. Like, for so many people who have this idea that it's one shot and I have this, again, this plan, and then it's going to, no, what happens is you have to adapt to what life brings you. And I think there is a beauty and a magic, because I do believe it's in your 40s that, like you said, women realize I don't have to care what other people think. I have to care about what I think. And to me, that's the skill you hone from your 40s until your last day on this planet.
And oh, by the way, if you're in a season where you are seeking that next amazing role or the next intimate partner, there are few things more attractive or sexy or appealing professionally, whatever the desire is, than someone who knows who they are and what they want. And we then attract the things that seem to meet those needs, because we aren't spending energy trying to live someone else's definition of success or beauty or happiness. We're kind of, into ourselves in a way that ironically allows us to get closer to the other pieces that can complement our lives.
Right. Exactly.
Kat, I follow you on Instagram, and I saw you've met President Biden and First Lady Dr. Jill Biden. So I wanted to know, what was that like? First of all, is that a pinch me moment? And how do you feel now about the future for women in our country?
Yeah, I was so happy. That was when he was Vice President Biden, and I was doing some work with a women's organization in DC, and they were hosting a week for International Women's Day and International Women's Month. And it was amazing. One, I was as blown away by Dr. Biden, as I was by now President Biden. I mean, she was just this magical combination of brilliant and kind and sincere. And let me reiterate, brilliant. And, I was just blown away. And certainly he has phenomenal charisma, expertise, credibility. I was just so blown away by them as a couple and them as individuals. And so now that he's in office and that Vice President Harris is in office, I do believe no matter, and I grew up in Jacksonville, Florida, which certainly has its dominant conservative population there. And I have great conversations with people from all political backgrounds, that I do believe that the changing of the guard, who is in office and what they stand for, has done two things for women. One, it has lessened some of the toxicity coming from the top, and that was permitted from many places. It has lessened that, right? There's just less of that. And then seeing Vice President Harris, so that's about less of bad. Now having a woman in office, a woman of multiracial background in office, I really believe in the power of possibility. And seeing women be entrepreneurs, seeing women lead in media, seeing women rise in companies, and certainly seeing women in prominent offices, not only the vice president seat, but also much of their administration, which is the most diverse administration, I believe, in the history of our country. That does something to people in a positive way. It says Yes, that's possible for me if I want it. But more importantly, it says there is someone who I believe has some shred of an idea of what it's like to be me, making decisions that are going to affect me. And if you put all that together, less bad, more good, it feels that regardless of politics, that there is a groundswell of hope, a growing belief in potential, equal potential, no matter who you are and where you come from. And that's only good for women. And at the same time, there are still many, many struggles. I mean, we're coming off of, yesterday was Equal Pay Day. President Biden and some of the lead members of the U.S. women's soccer team, who are well known for expressing their point of view in the pay gaps between equally successful national teams. I loved seeing the president of our country come out. He didn't go tell people what to pay people, right? He didn't cross the line. He said, it is unacceptable for equal work not to merit equal pay. And I'm a business person. I get that some sports, some media, some companies make more money than others. And it's all a business and it's an equation. And yet there are still gross, unexplainable, irresponsible gaps in pay. And it is very easy to fix. Very easy. It's like, take a look at all your employees, do an audit. Do you have unexplained gaps? Level up the people who are not where they should be. Take the hit, right? It's going to hurt, but it's not going to hurt as much as you losing your talent over time because some other company that's a competitor to you figures out how to take good care.
We laugh because Jenn and I had this conversation before
Yes.
off air about our own careers. And that's exactly right. There's a lot of people who question why certain things were disbanded, and it's all over money. I mean, anything that has to do with a company has to do with money more than anything else. The other thing, byproduct of that too, I think, helps us all as mothers too, because I think that there has been generationally, yes, people feel close to their mothers if they had good mothers. And there's, even for the gruffest men, there is a soft spot for their mothers. But I think there's a higher respect for mothers if they see more women in power, because I just think overall this idea that women are equal, that women are as strong, are as intelligent, are as savvy, I think helps all around. And I look forward to a generation of children who see their mothers as people who could do anything, just like their dads could do anything, which is a new concept.
Yeah.
Believe it or not, for a lot of kids.
And again, representation matters. And if there are more women in positions of power, they recognize the roles of women in the community and respect them more, whether that's stay-at-home moms, hourly workers, other women who are trying to make their way. The role of women in our society at home and at work is a critical area of focus. There is an abundance of research that proves that when a woman has $1, she turns it into more than a man for the community, how she thinks about it with her family. And of course, that's not true down to a person, but it is generally proven to be true all around the world. And women influence or directly make a wild majority of purchasing decisions. Mm-hmm. And so from a business perspective, to not have that population reflected in those who make decisions is bananas, because you want the people who are running the business to reflect those who are going to spend the money, make the decisions, and tell the family what they are or aren't going to buy.
And one last thing, I remember being so frustrated when I first got into the working world, because I couldn't understand how, okay, as a woman, I was expected to know how to cook, how to clean, and how to dress well and makeup and all these things. And when I got out into the professional world, the people that were running the companies of the makeup companies were men. The top chefs were men. The top fashion designers were men. And I was like, wait a second, you can't even give us the proprietary power in the things that we're stereotyped with. And so that's where I was like, this is ridiculous. And I still think it's ridiculous that those industries are still run and the main gender that profits off of it are men.
Mm-hmm. It's changing. It's getting better. in many ways, but not in all and not in enough. And I am really proud to see the advancements that are being made in companies, in policy, in social movements. It's all needed. And we're still not where we need to be. I would say some of the best companies are, because they just get the business argument for it, and have been good at it long enough that it's really the way they think, how they do business. And it's not even an initiative or a conscious effort for them. And then for others, they're in a different place in the journey and they have to be much more intentional. The pay audit, as an example, that's an intentional thing. If you aren't sure that your people are paid equally, I know it's scary. There are lawyers and people who are going to be like, don't look under the rock. At least we can say we didn't know. And it's like, no, you have the data. Even if you think you don't know, you know. And so stare at it in the face, fix it, be proud of your progress, and then make sure it stays really strong going forward. It's not as scary. Like putting the intentionality around equity is not as scary as it seems. Yes, there are difficult conversations. Yes, someone will take advantage, of it. Yes, someone might come out and create a problem, but those are it's a small tax to pay for doing the right thing and positioning your business as a best place to work, where you attract the broadest pool of talent. Why would you want to disengage 50% of the population? It just doesn't make sense.
Kat, I'm curious about where you are now in this stage of your career, because you have two young kids who are absolutely adorable, Ocean and Arrow, right?
Yeah.
And you said that you wrapped up with Focus Brands in January. So tell us what's happening now and what's next for you.
So many amazing things. I thought I'd be chilling out a little more than I am, but maybe I'll get to that soon. My husband's like, babe, I thought you were going to rest. And I'm like, I think you have a different definition of rest than me, because I'm energized by what I'm doing. So I knew 3 years ago that I would take a season that looks like the one I'm taking now. But I just put it off for many reasons. I just loved what I was doing. I kept getting called to lead. We had exciting things going on in the business. And so in 2018, I thought that would have been the time, after having been with Focus for 7.5 years. But it turned out that 10 years was the magic number. And so I knew then what I would be doing when I left, and that is what I'm doing now. And so this is what's next. First, I'm taking at least a year to not run another large company. That I could make an exception to that, closer to the end of the year if something is great, or it could be a longer season. And I'm open to that. I don't define myself or my success by having to be the CEO of something larger and larger and larger. I just don't need it. I love it. And if it feels right, I will be all in on running another phenomenal company. But I don't have to have that to feel important, successful, or accomplished. And so that gives me a great deal of optionality and flexibility at this stage. This season is about 3 things. One is board and advisory work. So I sit on the board of directors of Milk Bar, a well-known omni-channel bakery company, Slice, which is a technology company that serves pizzerias, and Human Co., which is a SPAC. Human Co. SPAC, that is a publicly traded company that will bring a wellness or fitness company to the public markets. Those are my 3 boards of directors. And I advise many companies, large and small, from early seed stage, post-revenue, just getting going, but with phenomenal potential, all the way to mentoring COOs and CEOs of high growth companies. And I've done that for many years in the background, but now I can bring that to the foreground and actually talk about it and do more of it. So board and advisory is one bucket. The second bucket is angel investing. I've been an angel investor for 8 years, investing in startups, which is something I've found a lot of my professional corporate friends, especially in the Southeast, where it's a less common activity than, say, San Francisco or New York or LA, haven't thought about it as part of their wealth management strategy or as part of their overall approach to industry. And angel investing, especially now with crowdfunding tools, You can write small checks as much as 500 or 1,000, or very large checks that are more typical, 10 or 25,000, and obtain ownership in a company. And it's risky because a portion of them go away. So you've got to make sure you're not investing money you cannot afford to lose. But any endeavor is risky. And if you do enough of it, usually there's a certain percentage that end up paying back enough to cover the losses of the others. And so angel investing is something I do now with my husband. We've got over 30 investments and with consumer product companies. And I'm looking forward to doing more of it, being more public about it, and educating especially women and people of color about how they can become an angel investor in small ways or large. And then my third area of focus is what I call content and community. So I'm finishing my book with Simon & Schuster. That will be a collection of leadership lessons that comes out in 2022. I host rooms on the app Clubhouse where I mentor and advise or just have great conversations around leadership, change management topics, as well as building brands. And I've been doing that for the better part of last year. I have an unbelievable amount of followers on the platform, so it allows me to reach so many. And then podcasts and writing and my newsletter on Substack called Checking In. So these three buckets: board and advisory, angel investing, content, and community. I am all in on those three things. That is what's next for now. All three of those buckets really do support each other in a very interesting way. And then I'll decide as time goes on this year, does this become a thing? Is this Cat Coal Inc.? I wouldn't call it that, but is this the thing? And then I roll it all up as one entity in business that I grow. Or is this simply a season that makes me an even better human? And some of it goes to the background once the book is launched and once some of these board roles evolve. And do I go back to running, another great company for the next season? So TBD on that, but I am all in on this season and those properties and activities.
I love the way you describe it in those buckets. I love the bucket concept. That just makes so much sense to me. And
for the organizer there. Well,
yes.
and I love the idea of like, you don't know, like you're adaptable, like that because no effort, there's no wasted efforts because everything leads to something, whether it fails or succeeds. And I think, again, for a lot of people, they're so wound up that they hate themselves if something goes wrong. And it's like, no, if something goes wrong, that's just leading you in a different direction. So now we are just about out of time. We're going to get to the Friendzy 5. Jenn, did you have anything else? Am I missing anything before
Let's do the Friendzy 5. These are just rapid fire questions. They're light, fun, just first thing that comes to your mind.
Okay.
Are you ready, Kat?
Ready.
All right. Where is your cozy, happy place?
Having a cup of coffee with my husband anywhere.
Oh. What's your favorite framed thing in your home?
The picture of my husband and I walking through the desert at Burning Man on the day of our wedding.
Nice. I just love that you got married at Burning Man. What was your most memorable birthday?
I think the one I just had was celebrating 2 birthdays since we missed one with COVID. And my daughter was very sick in the ICU during my birthday week last year. And it was celebrating my husband's business success and my 10-year career. And so we were able to go sailing on a boat by ourselves, COVID safe, with vaccinated captain, and my husband's halfway there, and COVID tests, and all the things to just allow us to be alone and remote and relaxed, but also safe.
Nice. Very nice.
Sounds beautiful.
So what's a daily routine or ritual that you stick to?
Morning time with the family, just coffee, breakfast with the toddlers. Then we, as a family, literally, we get our coffee and the babies know the word coffee and they help me do the French press, and it's a routine for us. And then once they eat, everyone says, let's go to the front room. And we go to the front room. I mean, that is a staple in our lives. And it's just this pure family moment with no emails or distractions or anything else. I mean, all bets are off after that, but that is a very special morning routine.
And I think that those children will have a wonderful association with coffee for the rest of their lives because of that. And finally, in our Friendzy 5, what fashion trend did you jump on?
Oh, athleisure. I have not been out of leggings for 12 months. And I mean, I made a few exceptions. I put on jeans the other day to go have a meeting, and my husband almost fell on the floor. He was like, "Are you going to an interview?" I am, there are many beautiful things about us coming out of the darkest days of this pandemic, but there are a few that make me a little sad. And one of them is that I may have to go back to slightly more constricting clothing, even occasionally. I'm going to try to find a way to rock athleisure in every moment that I can. Mama likes being comfortable.
Every woman on the planet is with you. Like, let's just keep this rolling with the
like
comfy
leggings.
Pants. Yes.
I may or may not have a bra on. I mean, you don't know. So that's the beauty of this. You don't know.
Fantastic. Well, Kat, thank you so much for the generosity of your time today and sharing your story with us. We want our listeners to follow at Kat Cole ATL on Instagram, and you can learn more about Kat and get her checking in emails and find out what she's up to. It's katcole.substack.com so that you can learn more. Thank you so much. This has been an awesome conversation.
And congratulations to you. I mean, what a fantastic life so far, and congratulations on a fantastic life moving forward.
Oh, thank you so much. And you guys too. Congratulations on this. This is awesome.
Thank you. All right. Let's grab a quick question that's going to tell a story out of the You Don't Know My Life box. Now, feel free to steal these to use with your tribe, at work, with your partners or your friends, because we already have listeners told us that they steal these, for work?
Yes. Work meetings, leadership meetings.
Leadership meetings. So thank you for that. All right. Here's the question for the day. What was your first concert and what do you remember about it?
My first concert was Billy Joel, and I went with
one.
My mom, yes, and a friend of mine and her mom, and it was great. I remember it being so much fun, and I don't think we had really good seats because I can remember him seeming like a little tiny Lego person. So we must have been pretty high up in an arena. But yeah, it was
that's a good one.
Great first concert experience. I also early on went to Milli Vanilli, which is quite embarrassing because they never sang.
The music was good though, but they pulled off a concert where they were lip syncing.
Lip sync the whole thing. Yeah,
wow.
Yeah. And I'm pretty sure I bought the t-shirt and everything and wore it to school, like all proud.
I thought you didn't know. What grade were you in with Milli Vanilli? Yeah, how old were you for Billy Joel?
That's a good question. For Billy Joel, it was probably maybe 5th grade.
Okay.
5th grade-ish. Milli Vanilli would have been maybe 6th or 7th grade.
Okay.
I don't know. I can't remember totally.
Nice. Well, my first concert was when I was 14. So I guess I was in the 8th grade. And it was Rod Stewart.
Nice.
So
that's a good one too.
Some guys have all the luck. That's the song that was big when I went to concert. Have all the pain. It was in 1984. And I went because I mentioned being the far youngest. My brother and sister are 10 and 8 years older than me. The beauty of having siblings 10 and 8 years older than you is that they're teenagers, or at that point they were in their 20s. But one of them at least was going to MTSU in Murfreesboro, Tennessee. And there was a Murphy Center. I don't know. I guess it's still the concert venue there on campus. Had a lot of acts that would come there instead of going into downtown Nashville. And so my brother and sister was able to secure those tickets. So I went to see Rod Stewart. And then that same season, my second concert was Elton John.
Oh, that's amazing. Those are so good. It's funny. This question inspired me to make sure that my daughter's first concerts have been really special so that they would have a good story. So the first concert that we took Lauren to was Zac Brown Band.
Oh, nice. That's a good one.
I'm like, when she's an adult, she's going to be able to brag that her very first show was Zac Brown Band. And we had the noise canceling headphones on her ears because we were all up front and got really good seats. And then she's also been to see Taylor Swift.
Oh, nice. See, she's got some good stories.
Yeah, so she's got some good stories. Reese, however, is only 5.5. So the only live music she's really seen was at her own charity concert, which you came to, the Ring the Bell benefit, which we do for childhood cancer research and fundraising for that. And we had the American Idol Maddie Poppy come and perform. So that's really Reese's first live concert experience.
And it was good. Yes. And it was good.
But when we buy a ticket to a show, I got to make sure it's a good one so that Reese has another really, really good story to add to the Maddie Poppy thing.
Well, Mr. Carter, okay, I give full credit to Katie Jo because, she's in the same mentality. And this, but I have a feeling that Mr. Carter, the lead in to saying his first concert is, hey, how do you know a guy has 2 lesbian moms? And the answer will be because my first concert was the Indigo Girls.
Yes. So they're my favorite band of all time, right?
They're a fantastic band, but obviously they're lesbians and they have a lot of lesbian followers. Yes. And so they did a drive-in concert during the pandemic. And Katie thought, oh, this is a great safe, because my son was not interested in going to a concert before this. and so Katie and her girlfriend took Mr. Carter to the Indigo Girls drive-in concert. And so, and because we couldn't carry him, either one of us, for medical reasons. So we had a carrier or a surrogate, but there's a difference. But anyway, we had a surrogate carry him and deliver him. And she happens to be a lesbian. And so when he was born, Indigo Girls was playing. And so Katie's like, oh, well, we could, it's going to be so symbolic. We'll take him and it's, he'll listen to the song that it was playing while he was born and all this stuff. And I'm thinking this 16-year-old boy, that again, how do you know a guy's got 2 lesbian moms?
I was raised by 2 moms.
So anyway, but I love Indigo Girls. Right. And so that is technically his first concert. So we'll see if he claims it when he's older.
Fantastic. Okay, it is time for Melissa Carter to deliver your mirror mantra for this week. And we say mirror mantra because in the mirror is the time that you sometimes are self-critical, but instead we want you to focus on self-care.
Very good. Yes. And we talked about ownership mentality. That's what we're talking about today. And I kind of want to go on what Jenn was talking about earlier when it comes to ownership mentality, that you got to take responsibility for your own actions. I want you to listen to this mantra and I want you to see how it makes you feel. Okay. Because it might trigger you a little bit.
Okay.
But it has to go with ownership mentality. And that is, no one owes you anything.
Wow.
Nobody owes you anything. Your boss does not owe you that promotion. Your husband does not owe you that love and appreciation. My son does not owe me appreciation for the things I do for him. I think if people realized how much they are hinging the outcome of their lives on other people, then they would understand how behind they feel, how frustrated they feel, how stuck they feel. I guarantee that the majority of the things in your life that make you feel like you are not moving forward in something that is joyful is because you're sitting there chewing on something that you think somebody else owes you. And so you have to move forward in your life, regardless of what you've been through. Nobody owes you anything. And that is because you have to take ownership for all your choices. And that includes the choices of the people that are in your life, the choices of the things that you allowed people to do for you, the choices that you're making at your own job, in which if you're not getting some promotion or some raise that you want, well, you have to look at your own actions leading up to it. And then if you are in a position or a job position in which you're not going to get that, then you have a choice on whether you stay or go. But nobody owes you anything. It doesn't matter how long you've been somewhere. And I think if people let go of that idea that I am in charge, I create my own life, I am the creator of my own life, then you will feel a lot freer and a lot more happy because you can actually make choices of things that make you happy in your life and choose to see the good in your life. But yeah, nobody owes you a thing. I'm sorry, honey. You're going to have to get out of that.
So good. So good. And as a faithful person, I really feel like if you believe in higher power, if you believe in God, I'm a Christian, so I believe in God and I believe he's got the plan, right? And so you can't hinge your life on other people, right? That's a mistake.
And even when you talk about faith, now I was raised in a Christian mentality. I'm a spiritual person, but I also feel that we're here to make our own choices. I also am a believer that there are people who hinge too much on, okay, I'm going to pray to God for this, and then it's just going to happen. When you don't understand that some of the things that happen in your life are there to give you what you want. It didn't show up in the way you thought it might, but it's showing up for the purpose of bringing you joy. And you've got to take the steps in order to do it. I know that there's probably a lot of parables and a lot of stories similar to that, where I think there was a joke I heard in church one time where there was a flood and a guy sitting on the roof, and one boat came and another boat came, and he said, no, God's going to take care of it. God's going to take care of it. Third boat comes, water's still rising. He said, God's going to take care of it. And then he dies, he drowns, and he gets to heaven. And he's like, God, why didn't you help me? And God said, I sent 3 boats.
3.
Why did you get in?
Yes.
So I really think so. So based on that, I really think that you need to understand that regardless of where you're leaning, who you're leaning on, don't forget to lean on yourself, because that's kind of the point, right? That's the point, is for you to take this life, take this body, take this mentality, and do something wonderful with it instead of sitting around and waiting on somebody else to fix your problems.
So good. Thank you, Melissa Carter. Please subscribe to the Friendzy podcast and leave us a review. You can also sign up for our weekly email, and we can send the episode right to your inbox. We promise not to bug you. We only send one each week with the new show, and you can sign up very easily right there on the homepage at thefriendzy.com.
And is there a friend of yours who would enjoy this episode? Please share this with her. Plus, our brand new YouTube channel is live with videos and extended interviews. If you like this show and share about it on your social media as well, just go ahead and tag us and we can share it too.
Thank you to our listeners who have subscribed to our email list at thefriendzy.com. We want to say a shout out to Angie Bell, Ashley Fitzpatrick, and Alicia McCabe. Thank you so much for signing up for the Friendzy emails. We're excited to have you in the tribe. And they didn't ask for that. We just like to show our appreciation.
We pay attention. And if you're about to expect triplets, then we have Angie, Ashley, and Alicia right there, all A's.
I didn't even realize that. I just pulled the 3 most recent names.
and then you can be the mom that says, Ashley, Alicia, Ashley, get over here.
Yes.
Soundtrack produced by Tammy Hurt for Placement Music, written and recorded by Placement Music creative team member Mark Daniels.
The Friendzy's graphic design is by Helen Vickers and web design by Caden Jacobs, and it's produced by Bo Johnson.
These are real stories by real women. Now it's time to go share yours with the world. Thank you for your gift of time. It's your time, and we certainly do appreciate you.
Okay, until next week.
Trust your gut.
Share your story, and stop lying about your age.
We'll see you next week. Own it.
Yes, girl. Own it.